welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit curious reader, because why not read a little bit of everything? I'm Jennifer Smith.
And I'm Joey Kelly.
And today, Joey and I are going to do something a little bit different. We did not pre-read any stories or novels today to discuss, but we are going to talk about our individual and collective recreational reading habits and how that seems to be a very hot topic in America at this moment. And Joey, one of the things that I would love to discuss with you today is what is the point of recreational reading? Can we define that for each other and for the people who are listening? When I say, what do you do in your recreational reading? What comes up for you when that phrase comes out?
I would say recreational and pleasure reading are synonyms. So anything that's outside of a mandatory thing for you to read. So like an email, that's not pleasure reading. Who has pleasure reading those? You don't, unless it's like good news to your personal email or something. Or, you know, if you're in school and you are assigned an article to read or something like that, or a book, doesn't matter. Whereas pleasure or recreational reading is something that you are voluntarily picking up for one reason or another. And it doesn't have to be fiction. It could be an article. It could be nonfiction. It could be poetry. It could be anything you want. As long as it brings you pleasure and joy, that's the only requirement, in my opinion.
I agree, Joey, because I'm like, oh, we didn't talk about reading purely out of curiosity and for joy. And I think we spend a lot of time on this channel and on this podcast talking about really deeply diving into what did the author mean by that? Why did they choose that word? What was going on in the world when they wrote this? What was their personal background? Like, we go really deep into the weeds. And I think you and I both do that because we love it. Like, it's fun. For us, that is joy. That is curiosity. That is playfulness. That is really a fun time for us. And when I think back to my early childhood of, did you read books at home? You know, did people read books to you at home? What was the environment that you were in? And I was thinking, Joey, a lot of my childhood memories do revolve around books, but not necessarily the books that I was reading, but me observing other people reading. And as we were preparing for this episode, I was thinking about my dad's sister. Her name is Kathy. She was such an amazing person in my life because she jetted off from our small town in Michigan and went to San Francisco. So she was like already ringing all of the bells as a young 10-year-old person. And when I was 13, for my 13th birthday, we flew to California and I was able to witness her. I know I'm a teenager, 13 years old. You know, I'm on the verge of becoming an adult. And I remember being in her house, watching her read a book. And I was just observing her, and tears started welling up in her eyes. And I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah, what's going on, girl?
What's happening? And she's like, oh, this book is just so good and so sad. And it's like, I am no longer 13, 40 some years have passed since that moment. But I just have, like, I can picture myself watching her and experiencing that and thinking, oh yeah, reading, that's powerful stuff. If you can make a grown person cry for no good reason, there's some power in reading. And Joey, that was just something that has really stuck with me all these years. Was there a moment in your young life that you were like, I think reading might be for me?
Real quick, do you know what that book was that she was reading?
No, and I love that I don't know that book. And Kathy, if you're listening, I would love to hear you tell me what book that was. I will say
the odds that she would remember?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure she would not remember because she has read thousands of books. Her whole life has been spent reading. And when my dad was ill, she would sit every day and read aloud to my dad. And so that was something that she loved to do, and he was no longer able to do that for himself. So, like, I'm sure she's going to be like, I have no idea what story that was. But yeah, thanks for asking that. Well, Joey, I can tell you it was something written before 1984, and it was probably something written in the 70s if I had to wager a guess.
We're narrowing it down. Okay. Well, maybe ask her to see, like, just a long shot. Do you remember what you might have been reading around this time? Anyway, okay, so what was the question?
The question was, Joey, what sticks out to you in your early reading life? Was there any moment that you were like, this reading might be for me too?
There are a few books that I can think of that I felt like, wow, this is something I really enjoy. One of them, and I do not remember, but I bet my sister has like all of our childhood books in her basement. It was a book about dragons. It's like obviously illustrated because there's there's no such thing as dragon, obviously. And it was just like really cool, like exploring the myth of dragons throughout the world in different cultures and what all of these depictions of dragons look like. And I remember the illustrations being really fun to look at as a child. So I'll say that one. There was a book of poetry that I cannot remember what it was called. Again, next time I go to my sister's house, I'm gonna look through all those books and see if I can find it. But I remember for some reason as a child, I wanted to memorize a poem. And so I picked one out of this children's poetry book and I memorized it. I don't know, not anymore. I don't know it. Maybe ask me Shakespeare. I've memorized some sonnets. But so that one, and then a series that I really loved as a child was called Captain Underpants, which I think is still around, but they made movies about it now. But it was like my first time reading like a chapter book. So even though there's illustrations in it, still, I remember really loving that series. And then the last one that I really connected with as a child was specifically in fourth grade. Okay, my fourth grade teacher, who I absolutely loved, and she was the best teacher. She read this book called The Things with Wings, and it was about preteens or teenagers turning into butterflies. Like they would form a chrysalis and then they would emerge and they would have just butterfly wings. It wouldn't be butterflies, I should say. And it was, probably a metaphor for like puberty and your changing body, blah, blah, blah. But I really loved it. And I had my own copy and I reread it like a million times as a child. So there you go. There's the answer.
I absolutely love that. And there are some things that came up for me while you were talking about that. I do remember being maybe 8 or 9 years old and finding a book in our barn. We had this big barn that I grew up on a farm. And there was a book and it was a poetry. And it was a big kind of picture book and it had Robert Louis Stevenson and it was about ships and it had this image of these blocks and like the kid was building this castle out of blocks and I was just like, I was mesmerized. And so I find it quite interesting that both of us were drawn to poetry as young people, and that's something we still love today. And when you said, oh, I read a book about dragons, I'm like, of course you did, because you are very much in that fantasy sphere in a way that I'm not. I'm like, no, that is a hard no. That is a pass for me. But I understand why that has such appeal for other people. And when I was a kindergartner through high school until yesterday, obviously, my friend Jackie back in my hometown talks to me about books. And one of the things that she said is like, do you remember reading Trixie Belden books? I'm like, do I ever remember reading Trixie Belden books? And I looked it up. And actually, those books were written in the 60s and 70s. And then in that brief period of our adolescence, they had a publishing spree. They just had like a ghostwriter. They published all these books. We devoured them. I remember she would come over and we're like, oh, we're going to trade books because like I read this one and you read this one. And I just remember that being, I would have to say, kind of like equivalent to junk food for your mind. I'm not sure that these were teaching us any type. I don't think they had a lot of literary merit, let me say that. But they were enthralling. They were a point of connection between my friend and I. And it was escaping into a fantasy world. And back to my original point and watching my aunt read, I think her modeling an emotional response and having empathy for these characters opened the door for me. It's like people will ask, why do you like reading so much? It's like, what about that is so compelling? It's like, well, you get to step into another person's world. You get to go places you could never go on your own. You get to experience things that might be scary or might be provocative or might just be interesting. And to me, that's addictive. That's like, I can't get enough of reading those types of novels. And yeah, Joey, how about you? Like what a book as an adult? Now, okay, now I'm a serious reader. Like I read this book and now I'm getting serious.
Like what made me as an adult be like, oh, I really love reading, or and I'm a serious reader, or I should be taken seriously as a reader because I've read this book.
All of those things are
shit.
wonderful,
Okay.
Joey. And because this is a playful conversation, you can answer any part of that you'd like.
Okay, well, I will say, because it's not super recent, it's 6 years ago now, that I was like, hey, you know what? I forgot I actually liked to read when I was younger, so I should try that again. And that's what led me to get an English degree because I was like, wow, I love reading, whatever. So I will say that I decided to start reading the books that my grandfather had quoted in his letters to my grandmother before they had officially met. They were pen pals during World War II, and he was stationed in Hawaii. And so he was very well read, I would say. I don't know. He died when I was very young, so I didn't recall. Right when I was 2 years old, he died. So it's not like I was like, hey, Grandpa, like, what books do you what do you recommend? Hey, put mine on TBR. Anyway, but he did write quotes from books. And one of those books is called Strange Fruit by Lillian Smith. So I started reading what he had been quoting as my sort of impetus to restart reading. I didn't read all of them, but I read a few. And one of them I discovered I really loved. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. I want to say that's her name. I loved it. I thought it was great. So sad, but so great. So I think that was having those books that I wanted to read to connect with this relative of mine that I had really no memories of. To see, like, why were you quoting these things? What was so great about them that you committed this quote to memory, or at least you were carrying around these books so that you could be like, oh, you know what, this is a good quote. Let me go find it or something. And then the book that I think made me go like, I'm a real serious reader now, okay, was probably, for most people, is Ulysses. I mean, once you say you read that, you got some gravitas. What about you?
So, Joey, just hearing you tell that story reminded me that it's never the right time to become a reader, right? Some people fall in love with reading when they're 5 years old and they're never without a book. Some people take a long break. Some people are like, I hated reading because I had a reading disorder. You know, I had difficulty, or I had dyslexia. I had a challenge, but audiobooks changed my life because it's just like reading, but my eyes don't have to do it. I can do it with my ears. So I think it's just a reminder of opening the door to experience. And as you were telling me about your grandfather and those quotes and like being curious about like, well, what was his worldview? What was he reading? Like, how am I connecting with this person that I didn't have a chance to get to know? I flash back to my high school, like, English class. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm different than the rest of these people here, because we had to pick a book. And the book that I chose was For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. And I was like, this is amazing. Why doesn't everyone read this book? It's got all the feels. Like, this is so amazing. Do I remember any detail about the book? No, Joey. No, I do not. But I do remember exactly how I felt. And I thought, serious people write serious books, and this is a good book. And it was just such a funny thing that I haven't thought about that moment in so long, but like, I am sitting in that classroom right now and feeling like I'm not like you guys. I think there's something very different about me, because I don't want to talk to my peers. I want to get back to Ernest Hemingway. He and I are in conversation with one another right now, and I want to figure out what he has to say. And so, yeah, so it's just like a really fun and unexpected memory to surface. And Joy, I will say, poser. I was a poser as a child about reading. And my mom loved to tell the story that I had a really good memory as a child, and I like to hold books. And so she would read to me, and I remembered what she said. I couldn't read. So I get to be the narrator of the kindergarten play because I'm such a great reader. And my mom's like, my kid cannot read. No reading is happening here. It's like, well, she's the narrator, so you're going to have to figure it out. So my mom read the book and put it on a tape recorder, and I listened to it so I could memorize and say my lines to narrate before I actually learned how to read. And so that is just such a very funny thing, that remembering that kids fall in love with language and literature and reading in different ways, in different genres. I think that's when my desire to be on the big stage was born, back in kindergarten, but it has been so far suppressed. But just a reminder that we have a lot of judgment, I think, in this society about what serious readers read and what reading is worthy of being read. And you and I read a lot of beautiful literature because we enjoy it, but we also read whatever it is that makes us happy, and we're not grading it on literary merit. And I think it's such an important thing to remind ourselves, other people, the door is wide open. If you enjoy reading the back of the cereal box when you are having breakfast and that gives you joy and it engages your mind and gets your imagination going, I'm like, that all. And Joy, I think you had said you had heard something recently about, or conversations you have witnessed about this sort of judgmental attitude about what's real reading, what counts, what's worthy. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're both from book club circles. Okay. So I feel like maybe that's, I mean, I guess we didn't really read like non-serious, in quotation marks, books in those book clubs, because usually you're reading like something that is well known of literary merit, because why would you do something else, I guess. But that's not true. Actually, I have read things that are just like, you know, fun and silly, and I've had book clubs about them. But anyway, but yeah, I think there is a lot of judgment sometimes with people determining what is worthy of your time as a reader. Like, a lot of times it will be fantasy or romance or romantasy. Okay, the combo platter of that is like, this is just, you know, as you said before, like a junk food kind of reading, and there's, you know, it's not going to engage you in any meaningful way, which I don't agree with. And then there was a term that I hadn't really heard or really thought about recently that I heard, which was upmarket fiction. And I was like, what do you, like, I kind of get what you're saying. Like, it's not mass market, it's upmarket. So it's like a level up. So it's between mass market and literary fiction. But like, what are the parameters? What's the requirements for it to be, like, what's the big difference between mass market? Sorry, not mass market. I do know the difference. Upmarket and literary. And it must be appeal. Like, you're trying to appeal to the, like, mass market, you're appealing to the masses. Okay. It's going to be mass produced, so in larger volumes. And then upmarket is a slightly more niche demographic. And then literary fiction is the, I guess, the most niche. So I was curious as to what some examples would be. And it was Gone Girl. Is that what the one said? By Gillian or Gillian Flynn, which I think I've read. I can't remember. I've read Sharp Objects at least. And I think, no, I have read this. Never mind. Anyway, Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. Okay. The Time Traveler's Wife and The Lovely Bones.
We will put them on the screen.
So I have read Gone Girl and Water for Elephants, which I didn't really like Gone Girl, but I think that's just my reading sensibility. And I read Water for Elephants when I was in high school, so I can't really tell you if I would still enjoy it as an adult, but at the time, I really liked it. Have you read from this list?
Yes, Joey. I definitely read Gone Girl when it came out, and I really enjoyed it. It was thrilling. I didn't see the ending coming, like all of those things. If it's the book that I'm thinking about.
I mean, I literally have no memory. I know that I've read it, but I have no memory of what it's about.
Was, and I do remember it was about a wildly unreliable narrator, and you're like, did this happen? Is this woman making this up? Is it a hallucination? Is she on drugs? Is this just a crazy world? Like, thank goodness it's not me, sort of thing. So it's like there were a lot of feelings with that book. I also read The Time Traveler's Wife with a group of people. And I remember this moment so specifically because it was beautifully written. I love the premise. It is a man who travels in and out of time, but his partner remains fixed. She's just in the time that she is. So he blipped in on her when she was like a little kid and not anything inappropriate happened. He was just kind of like, he observed her and she's like, okay, well, this is weird. That's that person. And as she became an adult, and I just so specifically remember this like resonating with me when I read this in my probably early 30s, that she loved him because he literally showed up in her backyard. Like, he's the only man she was ever exposed to. So it's like, I loved this man because he was the only one that I knew. And he loved her because she told him to. It was just this really interesting dynamic of, he knew this love story because he could kind of bop in and out of time, that they were destined to be together. So I'll just leave it at that. So we go past this conversation and we go to the end. I'm like, you know what? I don't like science fiction. And I'm sitting in a group with some other women. There's probably 20 people there. And they're like, really? What do you think we just did here? don't you think time travel is science
That's it.
fiction? I was like, I thought if it had a, like, if there's no spaceship, it's not science fiction. And so the reason I bring that out, I mean, it makes me look very naive, obviously, but it was just a reminder to me that my own judgment, my own sensibility about what I was supposed to like and supposed to appreciate, I was like, oh, it can't be science fiction because that is not for me. And I was like, oh, well, what about speculative fiction? What about Margaret Atwood? What about all these other future things? I was like, right, I need to broaden my definition of what science fiction can be. And I think that the reason I'm sharing the story is that I can make fun of myself for being a little limited and a little pompous at that moment. I'm like, oh, I don't like science fiction. But you love this book, which happens to be science fiction. I stand corrected. But reminding ourselves that if you enjoy it, it's worthwhile. The only thing I will go on record on the podcast to say, if you are reading hate speech or you're reading something that is physically or psychologically harmful to other people, I can't endorse that. But anything else goes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're reading a 500-page book about how the Earth is flat, probably wasting your time there, unless it's satirical. But if it's supposed to be science, you just wasted your time. So I could get behind that. There are books that you could actually waste your time reading, or that would do harm to other people, and that should not. But I mean that I think that opens us up to a different topic, because we have discussed specifically with Flannery O'Connor, because obviously she wrote very racist things into her stories. Not all the time, but sometimes. But particularly, we were talking about A Good Man Is Hard to Find, because there is a very racist, really random tidbit in there where you're like, not super necessary.
You
Really,
could have left that right out.
yeah, that part could have been left out. I think that was odd, but okay. And we had discussed at that time, I don't remember when we did that, but it was a while ago now, saying like, is it worth reading these types of authors who are actively wrote harmful things to different communities? And we landed on, you should definitely ask someone who is affected personally by that. if we're not personally affected, if they're writing about homophobia, I'm not going to answer for everyone, but I can answer certainly for myself. But yeah, generally, I think there is merit to most literature, unless it's one of the examples that we just gave, in which case, don't read it.
We would advise you not to read it. But again, everyone is free to do what they want to do. And Joey, I think I wanted to end our conversation thinking about ways to encourage people who perhaps have had a lapse in their reading. They don't have the time to read. They aren't finding the types of literature or fiction or graphic novels or poetry or play. Like, they're just not finding the thing that resonates with them. Any thoughts on ways to reconnect with your inner reader?
I mean, sometimes it's hard, I guess, because if you don't have a lot of time or energy to do it, then it can be kind of hard. But audiobooks are always a great option. I have a hard time focusing on audiobooks if I'm just like sitting there. Like, I have to also be doing something in tandem, but like not something that is distracting. Like, I couldn't be like, I don't know, I can't be like cleaning and doing it for some reason. Like, then my brain is like focused on, I need to clean this and then this and this and this. If I were like coloring, that's a good one.
Or driving is a great time.
Oh yes, that's a perfect time. Driving. I don't do a lot of driving anymore because I've worked remotely for quite a few years. But I used to do that all the time. I mean, if you're on social media, just look up book talkers. Find someone that seems like they have a similar personality to you, and you'll probably find someone that's like your book twin, that you'll be like, oh, I like pretty much everything that you read, so I'll just read what you read. And then easy. You don't have to worry about finding your own selections.
I like that idea, Joey. And I also have found, so my partner is often pressed for time. He's a very slow reader, very careful reader, but very slow. So our reading speeds are not the same. So he picked up a copy of the New Yorker magazine, and he's just kind of flipping through it, and he looked at the poetry and the cartoons, and he's like, oh, this looks like an interesting article. And the deal that we sort of strike with each other is like, if you only have 5 minutes, it counts to read for 5 minutes. So if you can take 5 minutes and Just give yourself permission to get lost in the story. It's just, for me, it's just such a life-giving and such an energizing thing to do. And I hope that the way that we communicate with each other and like share our passion for books inspires someone to pick up anything. And I will leave it at this last book memory that was so incredibly vivid for me. When I was 25, I moved to Hawaii, which was a very fun and exciting time. And my boss and his family took a trip and they're like, "Can you house sit for us?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." So I'm house sitting and I was like, they have teenage kids. And I was like, I need something to read. Like, I need something to do. I was out of my own element. So I'm like, I am going to read The Old Man and the Sea. So I went, I grabbed it. They happen to be a sailing family. I grabbed the book and I'm like, and I'm going to read this in the bathtub. So I got in the bathtub and read The Old Man and the Sea. And like, that is such a vivid memory for me of just like, this is an amazing moment that I will remember for the rest of my life. And the rest of my life has not happened, but 25 years has passed and I still remember just being, again, my love affair with Ernest Hemingway. I think there's something there, Joey. I think there's something. I'm like, why didn't I read
I
this
didn't know
in
about
high
this.
school? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know you loved Ernest Hemingway like that. I didn't really read a lot of Ernest Hemingway. I read, I think, Hills Like White Elephants in high school and maybe a few other of his short stories, but I definitely didn't read any of his novels, and I still haven't, to be fair.
Yeah, and I don't honestly think he's for you. Like the themes and the dismissiveness of women and the whole war theme, I just
Yeah,
don't.
war is a
It doesn't
hard
occur to me
sell.
that it's like, oh, Joey's gonna love this. I think you would love the tight writing, the very crisp sentences. Like he says a lot by not saying anything, right? We talked about that in Hills Like White Elephants. It was like all the dialogue that was missing was the entire freaking story. Like
Yeah.
we built a whole story around all the things they didn't say to each other. And I
Yeah,
love that.
I do love that. War stories is hard for me to get into. Actually, I don't remember the title, but I'll put it on the screen. I read this book, whatever's on the screen right now, whatever it's called, and it was all about war. Like, it was happening in an active war zone, like with soldiers. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to like this. And I absolutely loved it, and I would recommend it. But to be fair, I love French authors, poets, and playwrights. I don't know what it is about the French. They just understand me. I get them, and they get me, apparently. So he was French. I think it won the Booker International for 20-something, 2021 maybe. I don't know. Can't remember.
Awesome, Joey. Well, this has been a really fun episode for us to talk about our love of books, but not actually talk about any book that we have experienced together. So next month, we will be diving back into shared experiences of reading, doing some close reading, doing some analysis of how we both responded to that. And we have something really, what I think is going to be really fun for July. So we need to get through June 1st. I know, Joey, I know, June. We need to go there first, but something to look forward to.
And our theme for June is art. It will be all about art. So we're going to be talking about lots of art.
Lots of art. I am very excited about that, Joey.
If you like today's episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. And follow us on TikTok at Extra Literary Affair.
Great. Thanks, Joey. We'll see you next week. Bye.